All right, welcome to Redspin Sports, sports podcast that blends politics from three leftist former athletes. Tonight we got some special guests, Danny Haiphong and Derek Silva. But before we get to them, just wanted to toss it around, I guess, our triangle here of screens and check in how people are doing this week. Any topics, just briefly, anything come up, any pressing news that we want to talk about before we get to that?
Maybe Nate, you want to start it off?
All right. I was trying to be deferential, but all right. So there's a few things. We got the Justin just kind of made me aware of the official death count of official reported death count in Qatar of the disaster of a 2022 FIFA World Cup. That is it's disgusting. It's been disgusting a long time. I haven't had a chance to read the Guardian piece yet. Honestly, I just heard about that official specific detail, but the whole thing's been ridiculous. They take your passports, they bring in people from Pakistan, they bring in people from Nepal. People have no rights. There are no worker rights. The Qatari elite, who has been in bed with Washington for a long time. They have had their little riff with like the Sunni Wahhabist monarchies of the Gulf states that the U.S. does business with, but that's secondary to them being in alliance with, things like Israel and things like, imperialism and, obviously letting people in Yemen just continuously die a slow death, it seems like. But the thing with the FIFA World Cup stuff, I mean, that was awarded years ago, and now it's finally coming. There was a whole scam when it even started, of like fake air conditioning systems. They were going to make outdoor air conditioning, and somehow that was going to work, but then they had to rework it so it's going to be not in the summer, right? So it's not to interfere with other. I don't really care about the professional leagues or whatever, but it was just the whole thing's been an absurd, just grotesque example of sport and the corporate nature of sport. Also, just we're going to talk about it later in the show, but rest in peace, Louis Nix III. I had crossed paths with him, who known as Irish Chocolate on Twitter. Played at Notre Dame, but went to William M. Raines High School in Jacksonville, Florida, Northwest Jacksonville. Mike does a lot of organizing work right around the neighborhood where he's from, it's really messed up. And he was shot in an armed robbery in December, and then now his family, his family's looking for answers. We've had an epidemic, really, of former athletes, former NFL players. He was drafted in the third round by the Houston Texans, but he actually played in about 5 games with the New York Giants. But his body kind of was starting to fail him at that time. By the time you get to the NFL, I mean, you've played a lot of years, and I just remember Lewis being a gentle giant type guy. I got to work at camp with him once, but I coached against him his senior year of high school, and he was dominant to say the least. And he ended up going to Notre Dame, and it's just it's a tragedy. So that thing that's heavy on my heart right now. And Mike, what you got on your radar?
I mean, even in the Louis Nix thing, he was a football player. I think he was 3 years behind me, but I remember him playing. I played for the team I played for. Oddly enough, Andrew Jackson High School. Majority black school, by the way.
Overwhelmingly,
but he played at William M. Raines, the Vikings, of course, majority black high school.
That's even more black, pretty much exclusively black Vikings.
Black Vikings. It was
guys like Brian for context, Brian Dawkins, Lito Shepherd, Jabbar Gaffney, Harold Carmichael. I mean, they at one point had the most NFL players, most NFL players from any high school ever.
So does my school, by the way. But I will say that it was a tragedy to hear about him. I think even the circumstances around his passing is even suspicious.
Very suspicious.
Especially given that he was shot a couple months before. I know there's the JSO is insinuating that accidentally drove his his vehicle into a pond. Took them 3 days to figure it out. And I think the good part about this is not the good part, but I think the attention being shown to how much cops suck in regards to when people are going through a state of crisis. I mean, even look at Vincent Jackson's case, the football player, former Buck, I believe former Charger from Northern Colorado. Yeah. You know, his family had called to do a welfare check. A police officer shows up to his hotel room. Apparently he's fine. Leaves, and then apparently, 2-3 days later, he ends up dead, in that same hotel.
Yeah. 2 days later. I mean,
2 days later, and I mean, stuff like that in regards to, maybe if, we didn't have such a, a police state type of fucking system in which, you're cops who really don't give a shit about someone's mental welfare. You're sending them to check on them, as opposed to a licensed professional, what I'm saying, who can deal with those type of welfare check situations. Perhaps he would still be here. Situations like that, you often don't think about it. And we had a big conversation last episode about the mental effect of playing athletics, and, how after the game it takes its toll and has its effect in regards to, players not being able to replicate that in their lives. You're conditioned, from a very young age to this set routine. It's not it's not the same, similar to someone who has been in the military. You're just conditioned to it, and afterwards you get thrown back into, regular life. Yeah. When, society, you had a $1 billion, $1 million system that was literally conditioning you only to care about a sport, not really like develop yourself as a person to have the capabilities to withstand on your own. So, hopefully the Lewis Nixon thing was what they said, wasn't any more foul play, but, it's sad to see that, he was young, young guy. And, is no longer here with us,
But you got people like Trey Mason, the Auburn running back with the St. Louis Rams, who's just still, there's not much out in the last 3 years. He really kind of lost his mind. I hate to put it like that, but you listen to his mother, blames he was a hard, bruising back at Auburn. I remember him running over Jalen Ramsey, the game my brother played in the national championship for Florida State. And it looked like that was the game-winning touchdown. And then just think a few years later, he's just getting in trouble. Just off the wall, basically. And people can look up his story, Trey, Tre, apostrophe Mason, and hopefully he gets well, and people can reach him, and he's doing well. But anyways, let's bring in our guest, and get this rolling.
And I got one thing on my radar that I do want to just briefly bring up, just to bring to people's attention. This is pretty fresh, and that is Minnesota Rep. Eric Lucero introduced HR 1657. Which is not the first trans exclusionary in sports bill a state has passed, but it is the first to criminalize it. Wow. So now you can actually be charged if you. This is charging children for wanting to play sports. Which sports is one of the most inclusive things that we have. Community can come together. All can come together and enjoy sport. And yeah, this takes, the bills that play the whole, we are the middle ground. They're still trans exclusionary. They're still very one-sided, and they claim that they're the middle ground. But this is a big leap forward to actually criminalize that and bring misdemeanor charges upon parents and children. So, State Rep Eric Lucero. That guy sucks.
All right.
Fuck that guy, man. And I guess I know I had kind of briefly, I wanted to, maybe we would talk about it later about the University of Texas.
Definitely. We're going to get we got to, I want to get what our guests say, because we got to get this rolling. So let's go ahead and bring him in. All right, welcome. So I'm glad to have two special guests tonight. Danny Haiphong at Spirit of Ho on Twitter, friend of the show, repeat guest. This is the trifecta time here tonight. Danny was quite the high school, Cambridge, Massachusetts high school basketball extraordinaire. He can go into that as much as he wants to or not go into, but nonetheless, does a lot as co-editor of Black Agenda Report. wrote the great book, Exceptionalism and American Innocence, along with Roberto Sirvent. Is that how you say his last name, Dan? Sirvent?
Yeah.
Yeah. And all about, like, actually, just I have it right here. So, oh, no. Anyways, but people's history of fake news from the Revolutionary War to the War on Terror. So glad to have Danny back. And then pertinent and really relevant now, I want to go to first is Derek Silva from the End of Sport podcast, and also professor of sociology of sport more precisely, and criminology at King's University College in Ontario, Canada. He's host a podcast that's really got on my radar last spring with Nathan Coleman Lamb and Dr. Joanna Mellis, who are both professors, academics who study sport. And I think it's important because, at times they've challenged me and forced me to grow. And there's things, we might, not agree 100% on every little thing. But I think, the overwhelming majority of things we do. And I think that people in the sport world badly need to hear their critique, and also just how passionately they care about these college athletes. Because this guy, Dan Dockich, who I heard, I don't even want to say his name in some ways, but like he's someone that I've followed my whole life. I've known about as just kind of just another commentator, but I only recently kind of like really paid attention to sort of just like shitty politics and everything like that. Knew he was just kind of just a piece of shit who coached with Bobby Knight and all that, but anyways, like it's just really, really messed up, and I want to give him a chance to kind of explain that. But their show has done a lot in terms of like highlighting the exploitation of college unpaid athletic laborers, and really framing it as that, and not giving the NCAA like the sort of just not just sort of going along with the NCAA, just using the student athlete term, right? And I think that's powerful. And I think a lot of Dockich's, like the stuff he was trying to throw back about not being in the arena and all this. Ironically, Joanna had been a college swimmer, Division I swimmer at College of Charleston. And so that kind of what precipitated things that had kind of taken a turn for the worse. But also it's just ironic because it's like you don't know what athletes go through and all this stuff. And it's the reality is that they're championing more than while they're critiquing sport. It's a weird position, I think, in some ways, and maybe sort of contradictory, where these young adults like love the game so much they've grown up playing, but then they're being exploited so that they want to play, but then you're also like and they know too, most of them, and I think there's increasing consciousness on that. But let's go to Derek first, and maybe just outline what went on with Dan Dockich of ESPN and of 107.5 The Fan in Indianapolis, what he said on his radio show, and kind of like what's gone on this last week.
Yeah, I mean, it's first of all, thanks for having me. Yeah. We're friends of the show on End of Sport. We're all fans. And yeah, it's been a wild week. It's been a hell of a week, sort of roller coaster, things that we didn't really foresee. And really, like, first off, I think like just sending solidarity and thoughts out to Nathan and Joanna, because they are the ones that have faced the brunt of this. Like, I didn't get really anything. I really didn't get much outside of some hateful DMs and a couple things sent to my office voicemail and all those things. But like, it all really started, and I'm with you, Nate. I'm not going to like say the guy's name for a variety of reasons. We can get into that later, but it all kind of started out with a critique and the overwhelming sports media critique of Jalen Johnson, right? Of this athlete who just decided in a pandemic season to no longer participate in the working conditions as they were sort of forced upon him in a variety of ways and coerced. So it all started with like responding to people like John Rothstein, Seth Davis, and this Indiana reporter or radio personality, and kind of like critiquing them for coming out, calling him things like quitter, questioning his like loyalty to the team. I think Seth Davis went as far to like go through his entire career and talk about how he quit the McDonald's All-American game, quit in high school, all of these different things, like basically questioning this unpaid campus athletic workers' loyalty to a team, when our project is like highlighting that, there's no such thing as loyalty to a system that just exploits the shit out of you at every chance it can get. And then like it started, there was some back and forth about like, oh, these athletic workers are paid, and this idea that he's from the arena, so he has this like inside knowledge and all this crap. And like, I don't know Nate, you've been following us.
We
have our own networks. We talk to we have sources. We are talking to pro athletes. We're talking to. We just had Jordan Bohannon on the podcast a couple weeks ago.
And
go ahead.
One thing you and Danny share. I mean, y'all both talked to David West a number of times. Yeah. So, and maybe you could talk about him at some point. But I didn't mean to interject. I just wanted to throw that out there.
No, I think it just highlights the point. Like, we have our own network, right? Like, we have receipts as well. Like, this guy's saying like he's the only one that can understand because he's Bobby Knight's protege. Blah blah blah. All these things. Like, he's the only one. He's a former athlete, not knowing that my colleague Johanna Athlete was a D1 swimmer. Nathan and I are absolutely not athletes. So we would that critique's launched at us. That's fine. But then it went back and forth, and then like the next day. I think the next day on his radio show, he went out and started spelling out Nathan's last name by letter, talking about his office hours, like doxing. Public
doxing. The whole dude. I got to just jump in the office hours thing. Just talk. I really like that. That just. I don't know why that hit me so much, but it's just so absurd because I even remember going back before we were in COVID times and just how like arbitrary those were. It's pretty much just like some BS the colleges kind of like tell you just like put up there. I don't know any professors except like I'd maybe think of like one guy that was like kind of maybe not that cool, but they did not like really bend over backwards to try to accommodate students. I mean, especially in this age of neoliberalism, it's like it's obsessive. Just like you're asked to take surveys constantly about customer service. They've turned the academy into that, where it's like, I remember I was leaving Florida State. It was like, you're not just registering for classes anymore. It's like, it's like a shopping cart like thing sort of thing. You're like a discerning consumer, and like, so you really, the pressures that are put on academics. I mean, I'm not saying y'all are just doing it because of like you getting good 5-star ratings, but it is your profession but you all care deeply about the students. And it's just such a weird, like line of criticism. It just reveals a lot about Dockich and his state of mind and just just a horrible like excuse of a human being he is. So
I mean, it turned into a critique of higher education and professors and intellectualism. It turned into this like he lied about Nathan's salary. He had no idea. He said Nathan made 6 figures. Nathan's non-tenure track precarious faculty. He's not on the tenure track, and we know a lot about the adjunctification of higher ed. I'm sure you've talked about it. We know this is out there. And like, it's so whatever, that's a lie about Nate. So highlighting his name, office hours, it was all to suggest that this guy doesn't do his job, doesn't work, doesn't deserve that money. And who is he to complain or to question the all great sports person who's in the arena, who talks to these athletes, understands life as an athlete. Like, it's just this critique of criticism of this anti-intellectualism that is pervasive in sports media and is pervasive in sort of this like sports media versus like critical thought that constantly kind of bash heads. And that's what we as a project are trying to refocus on, like shift the focus from what happened. Yeah, it's like, it's annoying. It's like harmful in a variety of ways, but like we want to refocus on our critique of sports media industrial complex, the critique of the NCAA and mass exploitation, the critique of people who feel that it's on them to call people like Jalen Johnson quitters.
Yeah, no doubt. And anyways, whoever wants to hop in is fine. But I want to get Danny in on here too, just to kind of comment on what's on radar and stuff. And
And I just want to say to that point, this in the arena and understands, I've had, a couple run-ins on Twitter with baseball writers, and it's that same sort of thing, right? Now I get this because I have this perspective, and what they all fail to connect is that, okay, so you have this access and you've had these conversations, and so you're taking it at face value that these people are being genuine, honest with you, real with you, to where the information you're getting is so either pre-vetted or they self-vet themselves because they know what the media will do if the story doesn't go with what the media wants to hear. So they have created, it's different than like when we get in our echo chambers, right? And we all do it, but they are in such a created echo chamber where the very nature of their industry gets these student athletes, professional athletes to just say what they think they want to hear, that reaffirms that they think they're correct. It's just it's a with no, you know, no ability to stand back from that and look at that and go,
yeah, well,
they're telling me what I want to hear.
It's the consent argument, right? It's the argument that these athletes are consenting to this, and we question that, the very core foundation of that. Can anyone in that position consent to not only the like physical harm? We know, like CTE, we were talking earlier, like off the hop, about athletes who have suffered from mental health issues, who knows to what extent. We don't know if like these athletic laborers are even like understanding fully, or can even understand the risks that they're placing their bodies. And then we also want to highlight like the financial risks and the exploit. Like you can't consent in that. It's just simple. Yeah. It's not a place where you can possibly kind of consent. And yes, going along with the narrative, it's like, it's going to happen, and you're going to see that.
Well, I mean, you grow up from a young age and you want to play, and it's also like, without the thing I think I argued with Nathan with a little bit, and just like, it's a minor point, but it's just like, you know, within this system, it's like kind of with prison abolition too. It's like, not that I don't like in theory support it. It's just that knowing that within capitalism, it's like, there's just, it's a system problem. It's like, I just fear like that, you know, without there being something like to kind of replace like these things, if we just get rid of stuff and it's not part of a larger movement to transform society. But like, you know, the things we got to make struggles on, like, you know, at, you know, in the sort of like lanes where people can understand in a tangible level, and then, you know, point out let people learn through struggling through those contradictions and learning through that. But, you know, people do like love these games and stuff, but they don't sign up. I mean, there's the disillusion so many big time college football players feel. It's just like that's not the right word. The estrangement, the alienation of, like, they like the thrill of the arena. I will say that, like, it's like the hype going out the tunnel, but they also think the fans are like weird. I mean, like, I remember, you know, like the fan day stuff in Florida State, and like, guys like, man, it's like, why does like 50-year-old dad with a fanny pack be like following me around and going to the bathroom and stuff, man? Like, what's up with that or whatever? Just like, hey, you want to you sign this on my poster here? You know, like, I have this pen. This one's like, you know, chrome. This one, can you sign this here? Like, I've been a fan since 1974, and I've watched every game. And they're just like, man, I'm trying to get up out the hood, bro. Like, yeah, I don't know. It's a disconnect, Danny. But what are your thoughts? And then go to Mike. I mean, because I know, Danny, you probably to make some connections between the sport media industrial complex and the corporate media one covers politics.
Yeah. Well, wow. I mean, where do I even begin? I think, for one, there is something interesting, a thread in what you all are talking about, and the fact that, you know, these athletes, regardless of the level, they're really laborers. I mean, it starts at so young too, where, I mean, for me, my personal experience with basketball is that you feel like you are giving all of your labor to this sport in order to get compensated for it. But as you were saying, Derek, that once you get to any kind of level, NCAA, into professional, athletics, now for me, it's not even just like the external conditions of, you know, the financial pressures. Like in the NBA, for example, it's baked into your contract. You have to speak to the media or you will be punished. So you will not be able to play if you do not do what you are told. It's baked into the contracts. And you know, the NBA is about to play the All-Star game, and that was a huge kind of business union decision. And there's all these factors, I think, that go into just, you know, all of this, and how these athletes at the very, you know, at the very real level are workers, they're laborers. And that's never how it's discussed, even at the college level, where we've already had all of this discussion about slavery, and, you know, it's like another form of slavery, etc., at the football level, at the basketball level. But you know, there is this pervasive, and I was just thinking, there's this pervasive, I think, just ignoring of all of this. And then there's also this culture, it's this conditioning, it's this kind of ideological conditioning that happens in sports that's so, you know, it mirrors, as you were saying, Nate, it mirrors the corporate media. It's like the sports media, but it's really the whole environment that makes it so, yeah, you may hate it, you put up with the fans, you put up with the coaches, like a Bobby Knight, for example. Plenty of those around in all realms of sports. You put up.
Well, he didn't really show. He didn't.
Yeah.
Remember, Danny, he didn't really show them. It was kind of like he was just putting his hands on him, right, to kind of encourage him, right? Like that's. I actually watched an interview with Larry King. He did like about a week. I don't know why I tortured myself. It was like from like 2000 or something. He just been fired, and he's like, yeah, the only thing I regret is like, what's zero time? And he's like, dude, it's like I like Larry King's actually. I kind of like the style because it's like he lets just people. Kind of like, and he even Bob Knight, the stuff he's saying in hindsight, it's just unreal. It's just like, but nonetheless, man, I digress. All right.
What I was, just to close, what I've been really following lately with sports at all levels, I know that at the MMA, Kobe Covington went after LeBron James recently as being a finger puppet of China. There's been, the soccer player, I don't know, was he Swedish or whatever? He came after LeBron James for speaking about politics, but I think just overall there's this interesting consolidation happening in sports, and some people would just call it a Trump thing, right? This like Trump right-wing phenomenon. But there is, like, we're going to talk about the Texas situation that Nate finally brought me onto. But when I was reading about it, I was just like, there is this pattern in these institutions among the conservative kind of like right-wing leaning elite, where they are using the sports milieu as a way to recalibrate politically and calibrate politically and organize themselves as a political force and reach a lot of people, and also push these extremely reactionary values of, American exceptionalism, and we need to hold on to like this very just white on white culture. And it's very interesting in the sense that the so-called liberal class, they don't have any, they have the corporate media, a large section of it. They have entertainment, a large section of it, but it doesn't create the kind of, I think, unifying culture that sports does, because sports comes around one thing. Well, those arenas are so ripe with competition, and it's just a lot different, in my opinion. I think a lot of people are actually being reached, especially in this moment where we have this expect nothing, stagnant president in the White House who really can't inspire anything, doesn't inspire anything out of people. So it's a big,
this whole
huge lane.
Is just wear a mask and nothing else.
It's a huge lane, and sports are a huge lane to reach people. Yeah, it's a huge lane. I think they're doing that right now. The donors to University of Texas, all of them, they're doing it. Yeah. They're flexing political muscle. It's not just their economic.
I mean, I think that's kind of like where the basis of, where a lot of modern day sports came from, like how it started, how it's been used historically effectively, by different movements. In the Soviet Union, sports was used as a measure to build, morale amongst workers, and teamwork and et cetera, general, wealth and fitness, communists have always been about that. People fitness and a good mind, materially, gives good ideas, and your mind comes from your body. That's actually a Mao thing. He talks about, I forget the name of it, but I'll post in the chat one of these days. But just in general, I think that's the power of sports. I think that's the power of what sports has historically kind of been as a in a lot of ways. I think we talked about this in earlier shows, how cities view their sports teams as from a nationalist factor, from a local area, even in, high schools, you take pride in your sports team. It builds that quote unquote school spirit, or how we could call it culture, that you must have really, I guess, in order to put forth a message or a common identity. And I think, with nationalism, it has, certain progressive aspects, but then it has certain reactionary aspects. And the reactionary aspects is something that, the ruling class has always kind of used through sports, to influence through this University of Texas thing. That's a situation in which, they've always been in power. This big donor class of these alumni of these universities that basically have made sure that, you know, these collegiate athletes aren't really putting forth any type of opinion. And of course, you know, they're making millions and millions and billions of dollars off of, you know, laborers, you know, people who are like sacrificing their time and labor and their bodies to make profit, to drive up demand. You know, this is, you know, basic marketing, all that's, you know, capitalist shit. You know, this is what you know, this is what they're doing, and they're creating new markets out of it, new business models, constantly trying to evolve and make more money. And I think, you know, they see a threatening of that order, you know, especially in regards to how you saw the George Floyd rebellion last year, and how, you know, you had a really strong potential in this country for, you know, labor unrest amongst, you know, especially the African-American working class. But of course, it was multinational and multi-class in a lot of aspects, you know, like support for police accountability, or at least getting those killer cops on trial. And out of that, you know, sports got threatened, you know, their traditional bastion of refuge from, you know, the liberal media. You know, I could just wake up and see Tom Brady with a touchdown. That got threatened. And I think that what we're seeing now is a move to reclaim that, you know?
Right.
Now, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, just to jump in there, like, one like insidious side of that like reclamation project, like we saw this week, or we saw yesterday or a couple days ago, when news broke that Creighton head coach Greg McDermott basically admitted to telling his players to stay on the plantation after. Like, that is this project. That is part and parcel of this project, to like the fact that was his first response, right? Like, he says it just happened. Well, it just happened. That's the horrifying part. Like, if you intentionally did it, not that it like it's condoned, but like, you understand racism is going to racism. But the fact that was impulsive, that's the sport project, right? Like, that's the project that we're talking about here.
I mean, where Danny is in New York, I mean, Andrew Cuomo's sorry. I mean, he didn't like mean to like it's like if I like sexually harassed you, like, I'm sorry. I am apologizing. I'm sorry. All right. Like, but I don't think I did anything wrong. I just kiss people all the time. Like, I love just kissing people, you know? And So his apology, non-apology, you know, came out today. The guy who got an Emmy last year, and liberals were like, oh my God, he makes me feel so comfortable. That's the worst part. We don't did it in Trump, but the worst part about Trump was like it melted liberals' brains to be like, you know, just accepting ghoulish like right-wing Democrats because it's like anything but Trump. And be clear, I'm pro-mask. I think you should wear a mask. I'm just pointing out it's hollow when all you're saying is wear a mask and you're not having relief and you're not having this other stuff. That's bullshit. But just last thing before we move on, it's just like about Danny, I got to hear your response to this. Like, why do you think it is that it's so easy for the right wing in this country, and how this ties into your book too, American Exceptionalism, American Innocence, I think, to even like the liberals to like look at like displays of patriotism. We talk about this all the time. It's a common theme, like the flyovers, the soldier family reunions at games they do. And see that as just unifying and like apolitical. That's just, we're all Americans, we're all coming together, which is like, that's the way it's framed, which is extraordinarily political. I mean, I've been almost numb to it. I mean, I've been to so many of those things, just standing there. I'm just like, I've been to Army Navy games before. My granddad's 99 now, and went to West Point or whatever. And the last one I went to was in 2015. I just couldn't take it anymore. It's like Northrop Grumman drones flying over the stadium in Philadelphia, and people like just. But why do you think like that how does American exceptionalism as an ideology help fuel that like cognitive dissonance there in terms of not recognizing how and really being able to like believe that that's not political?
Well, I mean, I think there are many aspects to it. It's, you know, of course the adherence and the loyalty, the strict loyalty to American exceptionalism within sports among all sections of the elite is inherently about social control in a lot of ways. It's about making sure that there is this unifying message for the masses of people who are ultimately consuming and being exploited by on both ends, the labor and the consumption side. But I think part of it too, I think a big part of it is that the ruling class, the capitalist class, those who really control the levers of production when it comes to sports, their ideological differences do not get in the way of their their true interests, which is to make sure that their system of exploitation is as effective as possible and as profitable as possible. So I think that this cognitive dissonance is really a subtle acknowledgement that it is okay to militarize and to promote racism through these sporting events because it brings people out, it gets them to ultimately fund and guarantee this very profitable market, especially in the NFL, especially in the NBA. Everywhere there's a lot of this kind of and I think this was disrupted. There's a lot of this kind of hubris of like, this is okay because this is a market that must be protected. But that really got disrupted. I think I think that's been disrupted a lot in recent years, especially with the NBA strike. But it really has been a kind of gradual process where more and more with Kaepernick, etc., these disruptions have created this cloud over, I think, this assumption that sports is apolitical and that, we all need to just embrace the Americanism of it all and let go. A lot when people were criticizing the Super Bowl and the whole deal there was a lot of like, why are you not letting us have fun? And I think that's another kind of knee-jerk reaction of like, you're making it so we can't have fun now. And I know you guys have talked a lot about
Derek hears that probably every day.
yeah. It's like, you're not letting us have fun. And I know you guys discuss the contradictions. It's like, nobody's telling you to not enjoy sports, but there is something inherently, especially at this stage of this system of capitalism, where it's so decadent and it's so crisis ridden. Just like anything else, I don't think the sporting arena, the market of sports can really manage it as well as they used to be able to, which is why the University of Texas, their school song or whatever, gets in the news now, which is why, you can't really kind of go on in this pandemic and economic crisis ridden society and say, yeah, it's good to have the Super Bowl. What a great idea. That's just not possible anymore. And I think, from Kaepernick to the George Floyd rebellion, all of that, I think, has disrupted, has I think taught a lot of athletes that they maybe should speak up about these issues, even if it is just like a beginning and I think a product of just a cumulative anger, a cumulative experience of repressing a lot of that just to succeed and just to get along.
Sorry
now
about
we need
that
to come to. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. I just want to show you that you brought up the Texas thing, and we talked about this, and I want to, we can come back to the Creighton stuff if we want to kind of go around the horn, but just listen to these lyrics here, and this is sort of what has been an issue and what precipitated the boosters becoming angry. That players, Texas football players mainly don't want to be commanded, that they have to sing the song where they like the hook 'em horns saying, "The eyes of Texas are upon you all the live long day. The eyes of Texas are upon you. You cannot get away. Do not think you can escape them at night or early in the morn. The eyes of Texas are upon them till Gabriel blows his horn." And remind you that like this dates back. Robert E. Lee was a U.S. Army colonel that helped put down, they helped make sure that in the U.S.-Mexican War in 1846 that they, the whole remember the Alamo BS, right? Like was a massacre. You have the whole Republic of Texas and the foundation of that from like 1836 to 1845 was the idea of creating just a slave-owning republic. So that whole Texas nationalism stuff that's celebrated so much. And it even says down here that Gordon said the eyes of Texas is a satirical rendition Confederate Commander Robert E. Lee saying, "The eyes of the South are upon you," which was made popular, by former UT president. But yeah, anybody want, Mike? Yeah. I know you. Why don't you react to that?
No, I just find it interesting that admin didn't do shit about it, because they can't. Like, the majority black football team doesn't feel like going and singing the ode to, fucking racists and white supremacists. Confederates, they won't. And, admin, of course, is playing that political game between the two, like they're saying, you got the boosters and the donors, emailing them saying, we're losing paychecks because of this and blah, blah. And they're like, well, I mean, you want 5-star classes, so we can get a bunch of non-athletes. You know what I mean? Like,
they're not gonna. They'll ditch stuff like that when it means that their recruiting rankings are going to go down.
Oh, right? For sure. I mean, that's what it's all about. That's the lifeblood of the getting the best free laborers is the lifeblood of any successful billion-dollar industry. I mean, I think to a general point, in regards to why I think we've seen sports kind of be such a pivotal kind of thing in the past year and a couple of years, goes to sort of a tradition we've always seen in this country when it comes to the effect of the Black liberation struggle and its centrality to even the broader working class movement. Whenever you have think about the Memphis sanitation strike, how powerful that was for desegregation, and the unions rising all over the South, because the Memphis sanitation strike, that was the first struggle for a union, a public sector union in the South, during Jim Crow South, and they were successful. Dr. King kind of merged the overall civil rights movement with the labor movement, and that's when you saw those gains. Radical Reconstruction is where you saw the most democratic gains that the working class in this country has made. Free education, amongst the other things. So I think when you have laborers like these, sports athletes, these Black athletes, I think there is in America. The summation of how the NBA strike that happened is viewed. I think a lot of folks have been critical of it, and I think there's some criticism to be had in regards to, the influence of what influences did Barack Obama play in it and whatnot. But I think, we kind of are remiss if we don't kind of acknowledge how pivotal of a thing that was to see a whole sports league just not do shit for one day, and use it to bring light to a fucking actual cop killer. Jacob Blake didn't die, but ended up becoming paralyzed due to this cop from Kenosha. But I think when you have the Black athlete like a Colin Kaepernick kind of raise his fist, and you have the whole controversy over the summer with the George Floyd rebellion, which leads to collegiate athletes protesting around that, like Kylan Hill, running back at Mississippi State, former running back. Now he's going to the draft. He's solely responsible for essentially the Mississippi changing their flag from a Confederate flag. He started it. But think about, you had that happen, and afterwards you saw the movement of college athletes talking about, we want a union. You know what I'm saying? It led to higher levels of organization amongst those unpaid laborers, which is why I think, something always we can't forget to emphasize. I think it is the college football struggle, amongst a lot of struggles among athletes, are worker struggles, and they need to be looked at through that prism. Not just kind of isolated away from it.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking a lot about how these brilliant labor mobilizations, these brilliant political statements made by people, mostly professional athletes to this point, how powerful they've been. But I think the insidious side of this story is the fact that at the collegiate level, that voice is not the same. Right? That is nowhere near there. Now, we wrote a piece about this in The Guardian in the summer when they canceled the Pac and the Big Ten football season, saying that this is union busting. This was a tactic of union busting to stop this very athletic mobilization that you're talking about. So like on a sports level, if we look at the entirety of sports, yeah, there's the piece. Thanks, Nate. If we look at the entirety of sport, yeah, we're seeing these like amazing movements, but where are we like 20 years in the past in college sports? Like we are still very successful. And this Texas case, this like boosters emailing in is a prime example of that, of what happens if you attempt to speak out in the college realm. And I think we saw over the summer when athletes tried to mobilize and said, listen, we want to play. We love playing this game, but we want to say in our working conditions, just like any other laborer gets a say in their working conditions. And what did
Derek, I got the question I have for you is, do you think it seems like the whole, a lot of states, I think it was California, it wasn't California, it was Florida one of the first to try to pass some type of name, image, and likeness.
California,
then Florida.
And then Florida's like, we got to fucking hop on that.
Well, they love
because it's
It seemed like it doesn't seem it was name, image, and likeness was the so-called reform from the system. Like, okay, y'all want the full value of the work you're putting in, the money. All right, you can make money and sell, be on a commercial for like a car dealership and make some money off of that or something like that. But then,
but the NCAA's fighting that.
No, but then the NCAA stepped in and was like, no, don't worry, we'll have our own policy. And then COVID-19 happened. And now they're backpedaling on that. You know what I'm saying? Like, do you think the name, image, and likeness was like a kind of attacked by them to really kind of quail down on like player unrest? Because that's kind of what
you nailed it. I think it's the great distraction of the last 15 years. And particularly since Ed O'Bannon, so what happened with the end of the Ed O'Bannon case, which was a sort of famous antitrust case in California, that kind of went to get this name, image, and likeness going. What the end of that was that the court struck down the amateur clause that dates back to 1984, the Oklahoma Board of Regents versus Oklahoma, that basically said these athletes are amateurs. So since then, the NCAA has been figuring out ways in which they can appease people enough so that they don't continue fighting. And this, I think probably Nathan would agree, Johanna would agree, it has been a great distraction. Like, you're completely dead on when you say like, okay, once the NCAA got a hold of name, image, likeness, they started putting all these conditions on it. So yes, we think it's free market, cool, but it's only if the university already has a pre-existing relationship. Nike, Under Armour, like it's the same 5 companies and they're part of it, right? So yes, that they create the market. So if they're in on it too, which shocked if we are that they're in on it too, they're going to keep the prices low, the market conditions, so that these athletes can. So it's bullshit. And a lot of people have highlighted this. None of us are legal experts in name, image, likeness. We don't know like the law behind that antitrust stuff, but we are sociologists and we understand these games and the rhetoric and the messaging going out. And I think like you nailed it, Mike. It's a distraction. Awesome.
Hey, Derek's got 5 minutes left. I just want to throw it out there. So Justin, if you got a question, then you can throw it in for him. I was gonna just told Danny in a text that he'll kind of have the floor at 9. But I did want to just sort of the In the Sport podcast has really been something that's been really insightful. I mean, there's so many different interviews I can think back on. I mean, you had players. I think I texted you. I was like, I got back from working out or something, and it was the Wisconsin-Minnesota game was going on, and I was kind of and I saw Benjamin St. Just.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I'm flipping through it. I see him, and it's he got a targeting penalty or something. And I just I was thinking of it because I remember what a great, insightful interview it was. And it was one of those where he wasn't malicious. The receiver kind of his body was moving, and it's really hard to play defense the way they make these rules. And there was the helmet kind of got in there. But anyways, it was you saw he was really upset. I just remember how powerful that interview was over the summer. Hunter Reynolds too, and then remind me the UCLA defensive lineman. And if you could maybe just summarize some of those conversations you had for our audience, because I think some of those were really powerful. and encourage people to go back and listen to those in full at the End of Sport podcast, from the archive.
Yeah, man, that's Otito Obonya, UCLA lineman. We interviewed him. We interviewed Benjamin St. Just and Hunter Reynolds of College Athlete Unity. So this is like a group leading the charge.
And Hunter Reynolds is at Michigan. Benjamin St. Just is at Minnesota, right?
Was at Minnesota, is now going pro. Good luck, Benjamin. Good luck with everything. With all that stuff. But yeah, these are some of the athletes that like we are talking to, that we are continuously trying to amplify in every single way that we can, because they're going outside of that standard narrative that the NCAA wants, that it ingrains in that it not even just the NCAA, that coaches in from the moment you step onto the field, and you are athletes, you know it. Your coaches are instilling that discipline, that authoritarian control, and that sort of passivity on the part of athletes. And these are guys that are like, you know what, we're kind of done with this. We're not abiding by that as much as we used to, and they're speaking out a little bit. And these are people who love the sport dearly, who want to play, they want to be on the field, and all power to them. If they want to play it, wonderful. Our project is not to dismantle the game. It's to dismantle all the bullshit that comes with the game. All of the structural inequalities, the propping up of systemic racism and white supremacy. We were talking earlier about trans inclusivity, like the gendered and sexualized aspects of sport. And everything that we do on the End of Sport is to uncover that, like to say, listen, I'm a fan of sport. I love the Toronto Raptors. I'm gonna end this and go watch the second half. I love
you and Abdul Malik, Raptor, buddy.
I love the game, but love sports. But we can be critical of sports. We can we can take it on a little bit. It doesn't have to be this bastion of glory and goodness and representative of everything great in society. You know what? It's shit. It is political. It's cultural. It's part of the cultural reproduction of society. Yeah, that's fine. We can have both of those hats on.
And so Danny, I think Danny would agree, except for when you talk about the Boston Celtics, though, right?
Well, Raptors, Celtics.
Anyways, we all have our contradictions.
Yeah.
But
we're all walking hypocrites at the end of the day, really.
I know. It's something else, man. Like it's kind of hard to, this whole society living in these times, right? Is sort of navigating a world like that. And but I think also we got to realize some of these are protracted struggles, and the reality is that you can't just think about wanting things to getting discouraged because change isn't happening as quickly as we like. There's people that have struggled their whole lives and know that it'll only be but maybe their posterity that sees some things come to fruition, but we're laying a foundation, and there are like sparks that happen in moments where then all that work can kind of, that organization that's been put in, that's been built, community organizing and political education and all that can become beneficial. And I think we saw that in 2020, and we're still in one of those moments now. But Derek, I know it's 9 o'clock. You got a million things to do, and I just really appreciate you coming on. Is there anything you want to say on the way out, just in terms of either solidarity with Dr. Joanna Mellis and Nathan Coleman Lamb? I mean, it's just disgusting, the stuff he was saying about getting in the pool, and she was literally talking about, okay, you want to talk about getting down and dirty and competing as athletes, right? Talk kind of like let's race, and then it just reveals so much of the just pathologies and just of the sickness within like that. He's an archetype of like, I can think of a whole class of other characters that are that are Dockage. He's the worst of that. He kind of but he's hardly an anomaly. I think we all kind of know that, but. Yeah. So anything else? You got the floor before you bounce.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Again, thanks for having me. And solidarity to both Johanna and Nathan. Like I think we talked earlier about like how sport is kind of brought into this, like, let's call it Trumpism, brought into this whole world. And I think we're like seeing a lot of that now. We're seeing that like when people who victimize others, which was the case this past week with Johanna, and then claim cancel culture, claim that they're being outed in some sort of way, and then they sick their people on to the people that are that have been victimized, which we're seeing. Like, it's just shit. It's horse shit. And it's brutal. So
thank you so much. And I just lastly, I just want to say, just to make sure the audience is clear, it's just painful stuff. So, I mean, I don't want to make light of this, but I think people need to know. I mean, this basically was, I mean, I don't know how else you can take it. Oh, I'm going to get in the pool with you. I'm going to have to I'm going to have to get divorced because, either implying that he's going to go all like American Psycho and do some crazy violent, American true crimes, type of shit. Or, it's going to be, let's be real. I mean, sexual assault, and or worse, and that's just the reality. And that's where all this kind of came out of. And one of I guess the ironies that kind of come out of these things, that I guess is a silver lining, is that it does ironically bring a lot more attention to your project. And hopefully as a result, obviously you never want people to have to go through that kind of experience. Maybe some people will, know about the work y'all are doing and be able to, magnify, the voices even more so. So appreciate it. Solidarity.
I mean, that's the silver lining. And if people want to learn more about this, Dan Woken, USA Today, Chris Corman, USA Today, they've written some pieces on this. You can check out the latest episode of the End of Sport podcast. And we did a whole episode on it. You can hear it from Nathan and Johanna. You can judge for yourself what happened, but it was shit. So I appreciate you having me on and showing the solidarity and support. And it was fun. We got to do it again sometime.
Definitely. Appreciate it, Derek. It was awesome, man. Be well.
Yeah, thank you.
See you guys later.
Take care. So just so people know the context of what he was talking about, real quick, and then Danny, you can top of the floor. I just kind of let people know about your sports background a little bit, because people, I think, know about you as with Margaret Kimberly and Black Agenda Report, a lot of the stuff you do, the great reporting work y'all do, the holding the two-party duopoly, accountable for what they do, and the BAR, you always talk about the Black Miss Leadership class or whatever. But just in terms of sport, what was your sort of journey, and then kind of maybe how does that tie in and inform sort of your politics, or just you can take that wherever you want to go. But yeah.
Oh yeah, I'll try not to be. It's very long-winded. But I played high school basketball, Patrick Ewing's alma mater, Len Bias's alma mater, Cambridge Regent Latin High School. I had hoop dreams. I had NBA dreams from age 10 to, I think by the end of high school, I kind of knew it wasn't going to happen, but I wanted to play college ball. It didn't end up happening. I ended up burning out completely by the time I got to that point. And yeah, it's just interesting. I spent a year, my first year of college, just really depressed. I mean, what you guys were talking about before about not having, there is this built-in structure. You train, you work, you play, you play in just all the leagues that you can. It really is your life. And I don't know, I think for me, what was very interesting is that, when you play sports, the most people who engage seriously in sports, the vast majority, especially basketball. I mean, there are some sports, lacrosse, whatever, there's some sports that are just havens of the elite. But when it comes to sports like basketball, baseball, some of these major sports, football, the majority of people seriously do it. They're working class people, 100% almost. And so that's, I consider myself the working class growing up. Most people I played with, definitely.
It's almost the less objects a sport requires, the more working class it becomes.
The less expensive it is to play.
And a crate and then a ball. Basketball.
Exactly.
James Naismith with some peach baskets.
No, it's true. It's so true. And there are all of these mechanisms, and there is infrastructure, especially in cities, but everywhere to get kids into those. Into that milieu. But for me, by the time I was done, end of high school was a pretty bad ending. I won't get into it, but at the end of the day, I didn't have it anymore. I was done with it. There's this point where you're just like, I'm done. I can't train. I can't deal with these coaches. I think a lot of players feel like I can't deal with these players. I mean, eventually you realize that even though you're together, you're like working class kids together, you're not really together. You know, you've got all your different aspirations. I mean, it's part of being in such a alienating society. You feel pulled apart, and you're competing against each other while playing together. It's very it can be very it's very depressing. I mean, kids, I mean, most of the kids I play with, especially the ones who were very serious, we were all depressed. I mean, we were all just like this is hard stuff, man. You know, all these expectations and the pressure and the so, you know, for me, that I also, you know, what Derek was saying about college sports being this kind of very, it's kind of unique and special in the sense that it is a super exploitation. It's like an environment of super exploitation that's different from professional sports. And it made me think about Shabazz Napier, because I actually played against Shabazz Napier when I was, you know, playing basketball. He was younger than me, but he was nasty. Like, he was just, I mean, I don't even think he was in high school when he was playing in the league that I was playing. It was crazy. He was like, you know,
he was legit.
like a baby. Yeah, he looked like a baby, but he was killing everybody. So everyone knew that he was going somewhere. But you know, he was from one of the poorest communities in Boston. And then he ends up in 2014. I remember this. Saying that he like sleeps hungry at night because it was during this whole college basketball, all this college sports. Will they, you know, should they unionize? Should they get paid? And he made that statement. I was just like, wow, you know, I can only imagine his road to getting there. Because I mean, when I would play in this league out in, you know, Mattapan, you know, there's nothing there. You know, there's no hope or opportunities. People, you know, the kids that grow up there who are playing sports, they are expecting to either do this or not live a very fruitful life, or just not live. I mean, that's how serious it gets. So I think, you know, for me, basketball was definitely very influential in helping me understand, once I got out of it, helped me understand how important it was to me. But also, once I found politics, if it wasn't for politics, and if it wasn't for getting into this struggle, you know, I don't know where I would be. I mean, I honestly don't know.
Who was your biggest influence? Who was your biggest influence that kind of like got you on the road to being politicized?
Well, wow, that's
what year?
Oh, it's a trick question, I guess. Now I'm gonna get you in trouble.
No. I think it was let's see. Oh man. Well, it's tough because I got into it, you know, in college. There was like this bar fight with a friend of mine. A friend of mine was involved, and it was crazy. He got charged with a hate crime. He's African American guy, and it was just crazy, you know. I went to a school in a very white elite town, very white elite school, and it all came tumbling down on him.
They said he hated white people.
Well, he called someone the N-word, a word that he tended to use a lot. But you know, you can only imagine the context he was using it in.
Yeah,
he was using it in, like, you know,
it's like white teachers. That's like white teachers that correct, like, you know, black kids in the hood for saying the N-word amongst each other.
So
you know,
he was suspended, but he was charged with a hate. I mean, he was charged by the municipality with the hate crime. It was very crazy. So, you know, I saw his life was about to be ruined. I knew a lot of kids before me who weren't even at this point, whose lives were ruined by racism and class exploitation. And, you know, I felt like I had to do something about it. But after that, in terms of getting me on the road to actual, rather than just like throwing as much dirt on white people as I could, I got into, you know,
Danny and whiteness.
A teacher told me to read about the Black Panther Party, because I was here in the city, Occupy Wall Street was happening, and I just like couldn't get over, you know, how there was all of these gaps, right? No one was talking about the way race and racism was being talked about. I was just like, I can't take this. And then I was also in the labor studies program here, and the labor movement here in the city is, you know, very conservative in a lot of ways, and especially at this time during the Obama period. So I was just like, I cannot take this. And so I had a teacher from back in high school who was like, oh yeah, during the 60s we would read the Black Panther Party's literature. You should probably read that. And that was basically what got me into
Huey and Fred and Elaine Brown and.
Definitely, Danny. I wanted to tell you, I definitely big fan of your work. Definitely check it out. I've always been a big fan of the Black Agenda Report. I actually saw Glenn Ford at the NARPA refounding conference in Chicago in 2011. He was there. He's a big supporter of our movement for community control of the police.
For sure. Yeah.
So, and also the late Bruce Dixon, rest in peace.
Yeah, rest in peace.
Passed away in 2019, but I remember meeting him at the Iraqi War Tribunal testimony thing in DC a couple years back. He was great.
So, Mike, maybe can you give a little? You mentioned the police accountability. Give a little context to that picture that I'm showing in Chicago.
Yeah, so maybe? I did so I'm part of the national leadership for the National Alliance Against Racist Political Repression. So it was founded in 1973 by Angela Davis. It was originally called the Free Angela Davis Defense Committee, but when she got out of jail, she just wanted to free all political prisoners. So made it about that. It was actually refounded in 2019 at the Chicago Teachers Union halls. We had activists from like 30 states, a couple thousand people come. It was great. I really can't imagine that many people in the room now with COVID, man.
I know.
It's fucked up. Like I'm just imagining that, and I'm thinking about all the breaths.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was a panel with Angela Davis, Frank Chapman on the left. He's been in the Black Agenda Report a few times.
Amazing. Yeah. People need to read his memoir, man. It's one of the most powerful things I've read. I'll just say that.
Yeah. No, but Danny, it sounds like you were, I think there were certain moments for all people when they become politically woke. Not to use that term woke, but kind of conscious. I think college, I was, I got a little bit of upbringing from my dad. And when he was with us, he was he was more of a nationalist, a Black nationalist or so. So I would get some upbringings, but I think it was college was a similar thing. I think around the time I was at Florida State University, I think Occupy Wall Street 2011 was a huge thing going on. And I think, before that, I think we had protests around education cuts and shit like that, the bread and butter student activism stuff. But I think Occupy was what got me radicalized. And I think also on a foreign policy angle, I think that was the first time Twitter really was, a force to get news. So seeing live the counter revolution in Libya, Muammar Gaddafi getting murdered, and France and Cater and these fucked up, imperialists and comprador. So these these nations kind of overthrowing, which a country that had the the highest standard of living in North Africa. A big sports fan, by the way. Muammar Gaddafi was the dear brother leader. Seeing that, I think radicalized me. So was it a similar? Would you say it was a similar event that happened? You had a situation with your friend, but was there a geopolitical event that kind of you were damn, this is fucked up. I need to do something.
Yeah, no, there was a few. Interesting. As that happened, I started to get really interested in what was going on because I was trying to figure out, all right, racism is a real thing. I knew that. I grew up Asian American in a city, and racism is
in Boston, nonetheless.
Yeah, it's baked in. Oh my god! In my particular city outside of Boston, Cambridge, it's there's a large Portuguese community.
Nationality?
Vietnamese.
Vietnamese, okay.
So there's a large.
Hence that spirit of Ho.
Yeah. Portuguese community. Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot. There's a lot
Ho
of
Chi
these,
Minh, that is.
Yeah, there's a lot of these ethnic groupings out of the kind of universal bubble of whiteness, and they have been. As we've learned the history, a lot of Irish. Just the history of becoming white is becoming kind of a foot soldier of racism, and so and a lot of them had parents in my dad on my white American side, he was drafted to Vietnam, but but a lot of kids had, you know, fathers and uncles and whatever who were in the war, and they were racist as hell. So they were racist, you know, just like it was like in the language. So
not to get too personal, but did your parents meet? But
no, they met afterward. No.
Mm-hmm.
So my mom actually didn't come in 75. She came a little earlier than that, I think, out of the few folks that did before the war ended.
I mean, it definitely feels like the two, I guess, who was the, you know, they call them world wars, but, you know, I guess the left calls them imperialist wars. It definitely, you know, you had compulsory like type of, you know, drafted into the military, so it's kind of it kind of ingrained into a lot of definitely predominantly white America, this super hardcore like anti-communism, like right wing fixation on that. With the fresh nationalities who were drafted, it bred a lot of, you know, weapons training and other kind of, you know, means. So I've always wondered though, the fact that we haven't had the draft in like decades and whatnot, and you've like kind of seen, like, it seems like that age of folks with that kind of super anti-communist kind of, you know, veneer, they're getting older. You know what I'm saying? I think, you know, we talked about vaccines earlier, like in Florida specifically, Governor Ron DeSantis, who had the CPAC convention is currently voted the second.
DeSantis always makes an appearance on this show.
Always.
No, but you know, you know, he's only giving vaccines to people 65 or older. You know, 65 up. That's it. Protect the seniors, you know, and it's like, oh, he's also running for re-election next year. And
you know, it was funny. My parents are 67, and he was just like, he hates DeSantis, but he's just like, well, you know, I mean, I guess I'm not going to complain about
teachers,
that, you know?
Basically, the teachers and the cops, oddly enough, they had to beg and scream for a vaccine. So he's like, okay, 50 and older. Well,
in New Jersey, we got March 15th. We're going to be considered essential now.
Oh, good.
For vaccination.
Yeah. I said to say that he had like a ceremonial vaccination of the Bay of Pigs veterans. And like they're all like 80 and about to die anyway.
You told me that before.
And he's doing these. I just had to say, it seems like there's this fixation on we got to protect. You know, these are the last true blood
anti-communist warriors. Yeah,
anti-communist warriors. I mean,
Dan Kovalik literally
they're reproducing. You know, but I'm just saying, like the OGs of that movement, man. They're like,
Yo, Mike, Dan Kovalik told me, like, when I interviewed him last week, was like that they had a generally like they had some like liberal type Catholicism, and people like there is a history of that, like Archbishop Romero, him being killed, like it was
the Plowshare 7.
Yeah, it really like blew that like opened his mind up, and he played like high school football at King Griffey Jr. and there's a number of others that go back. That's a really enjoyable conversation. And anyways, just hearing his background, how he kind of came to his consciousness. I mean, he said this one team chaplain they had having to take the Eucharist every time they went off the field in Cincinnati. This is a powerhouse football program at Moeller High School, but this guy brought a Contra like death squad commander in to talk to the team. At one point, it was just talking about personal responsibility and like how to like bootstrap it. Meanwhile, he's just flying back down there and like committing war crimes. This just reminded
me of like how. And this is a quick digression. I'm sorry. We'll get back to the topic. All these like Urban Meyer, you know, he's a, you know, go Jags, you know, whatever. No bias, you know, Jacksonville. You know, he was making six figures like as a consultant for corporations. You know, like these coaches, these NFL coaches or these college coaches create this mentality. That's why sports is fascinating in the sense that it resembles a management structure in a capitalist society, and how do you make it the most efficient and effective? You know what I'm saying? So like these billion-dollar corporations would literally pay these coaches. How did you get those college players in line like that? You're doing it with free labor. What the fuck? Like, and the threat of like future incentive, of course, if you make it to the pros.
Right. Yeah.
But I find that I always found that fascinating about how like Nick Saban does these leadership retreats and these coaches do all this stuff, making money from rich people.
Yo, read his book to learn how to be a champion, Mike.
As as the resident member on this panel that has spent the most time in big tech corporate America, no, that's huge. I mean, Amazon would run all of their corporate management like, you know, a coach would run a sports team, and you're like, okay, but practically, what can you do in my field? And they're like, nothing.
Big words.
What I can,
step up everywhere.
but I can motivate you, and you're like, can you? Because you don't know what I do.
Need to be more.
Yeah, no, that's a huge part.
The consultant. I love the consultant industry. Yeah. We have this in the public education now. People, the issue is not that public education is underfunded. It's that like what does get funded gets siphoned the hell off by all this corporate bullshit. That by the time it talks about like what actually gets to the classroom, it's massively underfunded.
Bro.
There's like a lot of money spent on public education. It just doesn't get to the classroom level.
And this is where I go. I mean, you know, I'm an organizer, you know, in the community, and with I'm also a labor union organizer. Even with labor unions, there's a consultant class that has emerged, you know, especially in DC, that, you know, makes a lot of money and tells, you know, the unions, hey, don't say worker, say working family. Because
call us an association instead of a union.
Say association, not union, you know. And then even in community, I mean, there's people who just make money off of the movement existing, you know, or that you know, struggle existing, you know. And you know, and those who are able to do it in a way, I guess, and actually put forth the movement, you know, that's great. A lot of them don't, you know.
Mike could have sold out big time. Like, I mean, you had the people coming at you like left and right. I mean, like all those, like when you were doing the Dream Defender stuff and the Trayvon stuff was popping, and you were giving like, you know, some. I mean, Mike's an orator, man. Once he gets up there, he's quiet. But when he gets flowing, man, some of those speeches at the old Capitol in Tallahassee, man, he got the crowd be like, oh, they're into it. And yeah, I mean, I'm not just trying to like, you know, blow smoke, man. I'm just keeping it 100. But like, it's just you know, I don't know. It's like, there's a whole like ecosystem of like Democratic Party. Like they're like, oh, I love how like this is great. We want to like help you like plug you into this like congressional candidates campaign. And then you can bring all your ideas in there. Blah blah. Then you'll get to Washington and then you're like reading Marx and Lenin, and then like, before you know it, you're reading like Ta-Nehisi Coates. You know.
I do want to throw something out there, though, just to kind of piggyback off of Danny's story and what Mike shared, and that is, you know, there's a flip side to that coin of when an athlete can speak out and when they can't, and that is so tied to how financially successful your sport is. As Nate and I have had in conversations, I will ultimately say I was fortunate enough to be radicalized in my mid-teens. But at the same time, that's unfortunate in ways, because now that I'm turning 40 in really soon, I've been beating my head against that wall since I was like 15. You know, so I just added up those years. But at the same time, as a track athlete at a D1 school, I could say whatever the hell I want. Nobody cared because nobody was there. Mm-hmm. My alma mater has a mascot they need to change. I could turn my track uniform inside out and run a race. Mm-hmm. And
you used to do that?
Cared. I did that one time. Nobody.
Wait, Grand Valley. It was Grand Valley State, right?
Central Michigan.
Central Michigan. Oh yeah, I can't believe I forgot. I was just thinking Brian Kelly.
No, he was at Central when I was.
Yeah, and then he was at Grand Valley before, but the Chippewas, right?
Yeah. So, it's one of those things where, like, they'll give a platform because nobody's here to interview you after whatever statement. I mean, I could have draped myself in a tracksuit that was this flag, and somebody may have been like, seriously, somebody may have been like, hey man, like that's not awesome, but like nobody would have stopped me.
Do you know how many people communism killed?
Yeah. Because the British wouldn't have moved factories. Anyway, I don't even want to get started on that. But it is so tied to how your sport is viewed, you know, and outside of somebody from, you know, shout out to the people in Mount Pleasant, Michigan that'll know this reference. like the sports writer that came to cover, whatever unfortunate asshole had to come and cover track and field, isn't going to write about what I did.
I think track's pretty dope. I mean,
I had stepped away, but I could still hear you when it comes to like what a sport requires, kind of like shows the poverty. Yeah, my sport requires feet. And even then they can be artificial. They can be, it's one of those things.
There's a lot of crossover with football. There's a lot of a lot of the best football players, like run track in the spring. Marvin Bracey at Florida State was a 5-star wide receiver out of Orlando, and then he ended up like focusing on track but they're professional. If you go professional in track and you get tied in with like Team USA and that whole track, then you're it's different.
Yeah, but at that level, it's just we're not football. We weren't basketball. We weren't even college baseball, which isn't even that.
Nate, go out. Congrats on the new niece.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you. Hadley Wallace is in the world. I'm gonna be in Jacksonville on the 18th to the 28th, actually. So I'll see you down there not too long. But I wanted to talk just like go back to the college stuff before we get out of here, because the Texas thing is like not surprising any of us, but it's something that I know, Danny. You mentioned that you kind of had some thoughts on that. I know your focus is like squarely on the NBA, which I understand, but. Is there anything like you saw with that kind of like struck you like beyond just being, that's more shittiness and American society? Because to me, Texas being founded as a slave-owning republic, the Republic of Texas, their flag, the romanticize it, the Lone Star State, tied in with what we just saw with that Arctic storm going through there. And then you look at Texas, University of Texas, and then Texas A&M University are the two most profitable athletic departments in the U.S. So, like, I don't know. You heard that song, and there's no way, like, you look at when you think there's lyrics that doesn't like harken back to like runaway slaves, right? It's pretty in your face, don't you think?
Yeah, I think it's so in your face. Until you had brought it to my attention, I generally just follow news, and on any good day, if it was covered a lot, I would have known about this. But I think the reason why it's not covered like some of the other things that have been covered is there is this, neither side of what I think, of the ruling class, whether it's you guys were talking about the consultant driven, I hate diversity consultants. You can see them kind of frothing at the mouth now after the George Floyd protests and the NBA.
Oh, yeah.
There's so much money to be made on it. We just
white fragility.
Oh my! There's so much money to be made on it, and we, and to put into that the whole the Black Lives Matter network running off with $60 million of surplus money that they won't say where they got it from. There is a lot of money to be made, but you can't make it on this, even though you would think that you could, but you can't, because this is not just about a symbol anymore. This is about the roots of how a state like Texas even came to be, its linkages to someone like Robert E. Lee, but also its linkages to just the genocidal, settler, colonial, racist imagination. Texas, that's why it was formed, as you were saying, Mike. It was formed because it was designed to be a slave state, and not to mention that there is this kind of organic, I think not spoken about a lot, guys like Gerald Horne talk about it a lot, that there's this organic, like a lot of Black people running away from slavery would go to Mexico. And there is a lot of history there as well that you just don't erase. And I don't think that's talked about either, because a lot of people outside of Texas may not understand, or outside of the region may not understand how bad that is. They might just think of it as symbolism, but for a lot of people it's very real.
And Professor Horne's at the University of Houston too, so he's like exactly right there.
I have a question for each of you, and that is, do you think that the eyes of Texas upon you, do you think that there's correlation in, we've talked about this a little bit in the past, but Francis Scott Key was so anti anyone who had escaped slavery to help then fight the British. And the reason being because you fight for the side that will free you, because you should not be enslaved.
Yeah.
And he had such vitriol and hatred that the idea that you'd escape slavery and fight against it with the British against the Americans, that he wrote a verse about it in the Star Spangled Banner, where he literally says the grave is coming for you. And I wonder in a way, if that eyes of Texas is upon you are those who fled Texas to go in like that similar vein. But like, it feels so similar to me that we have these awful songs that people won't let go, but they ignore where this shit comes from, because people ignore that, the other verses of the Star Spangled Banner all the time. And it's not hard to see where that vitriol comes from. And it came from, he mentions hirelings and slaves literally will be murdered. It's insane. But like, I'm just curious, like, thoughts on that.
I think they know exactly where it comes from. And I think the talking point in the media is we can't erase our history. I mean, it's them, it's them. They found a good slogan that they feel like can get a lot of people to agree with, erasing history and sanitize. You can't sanitize history unless you're doomed to repeat it. It's just not surprising, that this is what they're doing. It also makes me understand how shitty Sam Ellinger is. He's the only.
Talk about Sam Ellinger and his lack of solidarity. He's the Texas Longhorn quarterback
who's like the only guy out there. Why his teammates refuse to go out there? Like, dude, you suck. And,
he's like,
he's gonna go.
He reminds me of that West Point grad on Villanueva, the left tackle for the Steelers. Who like the whole Steelers were in the locker room. He's like, I went to West Point. I'm going out on the field, and they're all in the locker room, and he's out there.
This is one thing I do track. Yeah. I do track the Blue Lives Matter athletes. So I know the Jacksonville Jaguars, Urban Meyer did a very militant thing, cutting Tyler Eifert, who's all these players
who had Aaron Thorne had the on the back of his helmet, man. Like
he was like the officer who got killed in St. Louis protecting his friend's store. He had that guy's name, while these other people actually had names of like black people.
Even Gardner Minshew had Ahmaud Arbery on his thing.
Even Gardner Minshew, he was. That was fake, but
hey, I respect Gardner Minshew. He's not a good quarterback, but I was living in Washington when he was still there. So
and he would be in Washington State's more like the let's say not coastal elite type spot.
I like Gardner.
Sorry. Come on, don't hate. You hating on Justin now? What?
No. I like if you have a mother like yours, I don't like that. I'm just joking.
I was going to say I'm a white guy in Indiana with a red hat and a mullet before that. I moved here right before.
Let's just say, Danny, just think about it. He is a St. Louis Cardinals fan who the people know the Cardinals have the most passionate college football zealous fan base in Major League Baseball. Like you go to a Major League Baseball game anywhere in the U.S. and there will be thousands of Cardinals fans there. I mean, I've actually kind of it's a sociological phenomenon, really. The Upper South.
Where's Derek? Yeah.
I mean, for real. It really is. You got people from Arkansas, Tennessee, Mississippi. Before the Atlanta Braves and Atlanta Falcons both became teams in 1966. There were no major pro sports teams in the South. So it was the Washington football team. Was the kind of the team of the South in a lot of ways, that being below the Mason-Dixon line. I guess the Cowboys a little out further west, but they didn't become a team until 1960. And then you had, so you had the Cardinals had this huge appeal. And then, so you think they're Justin being a kid growing up in Michigan, then going to big Cardinals fan, then becoming radicalized in ML.
What's funny about that is that
Indiana.
I credit one sentence that my dad said to me, which, by the way, I don't know what led him to say this to an 8-year-old, but when I was 8 and I asked him if I could be a Cardinals fan because I really liked them instead of the Tigers, he told me that rooting for the home team is what made Germans Nazis. I was 8.
Whoa, that's talk about that's a little intense, man.
And I had to put that into context, and then it made a lot more sense when I watched the Gulf War boosterism happen on television.
Yeah, because you would remember that you were born. You're about 5 years older than me. I'm not trying to be damn. It is what it is, So I was I was born in '86, and then I know Mike and Danny are about the same age, but but I barely vaguely remember. I remember seeing the Clinton Gore bumper stickers and the Bush quail stuff in '92, just vaguely, and just kind of what is all this about. But you would have been 10 years old, and describe what
I remember. I remember watching
25 with the Giants and Bills. What that Whitney Houston national anthem? Like, holy shit, that is like the apex of just jingoism in this country has ever been.
Well, I remember, for an adult, it was probably different, but for me at my age, watching bombs go down chutes with cameras on the end of them, and the disconnect, they weren't mentioning people, and that's easy for a kid to watch and go, but who the hell's in those buildings? And it's just about the beautiful technology of our weapons, and look at the precision that this weapon can take.
That's Brian Williams. Brian Williams.
Well, that was recently, but I'm saying back then, it was so weird to watch, especially when my dad was in the Navy out of poverty, and that's the only reason, and just missed Vietnam, but lost a lot of friends, and has never been a fan of any of that. And so I had that context of I'm watching this stuff, and my dad's thinking about the destruction side of things and talking about it in his context. I don't remember a lot of it, but you just remember from a 10 and 11-year-old standpoint is, again, where is the mention of these people? Which then you go to about 15, discover people like Robert Fisk, which, love or hate Robert Fisk in his prose way of approaching what he did. But Robert Fisk was so important in the way that he never told a war story that wasn't from the people and the perspective of the people caught in the war, and the people dying, because their story will help really paint the story, because two sides can fight over all day long who's justified. The people dying are the people that matter. So I was able to find that, within 4 to 5 years of seeing that. But yeah, as a kid, that's weird to watch when they're providing no context for the bodies in those buildings. And it can really, I think about kids whenever we go through wars now, that same sort of, and then you think about if their parents are providing the context of there are people in there. Yeah, bad people. And you're like, right. So then the kid just goes, cool. All right, so they're bad people. I get it. Yeah. I didn't have that, and my dad wasn't necessarily going to lay that all out for me. But left with that hole of just there's fucking people in these buildings. People are dying. And I don't, and the media is clearly providing no way to feel about it.
But that kind of hits on
just boosteristic.
That kind of hits on Danny's terrain, though. I mean, real quick, I know we got to wrap this up in the next 5 minutes, but I just want to I think that's really important because think of the corporate media. Think of what their objectives are. It's to sanitize U.S. imperialism. It's to make it palpable, right? It's to enable people to believe in these exceptionalist narratives. It's the place like where I live in Jersey City, which is one of the most 75 languages spoken in a municipality right across the river from Lower Manhattan with just under 300,000 people, and having so many of them entranced with the idea, because they have so much invested in the idea of America being this promised land and stuff, literally and figuratively. And so the idea that if you start telling those stories, there's a very material reason why we can't have that conversation in corporate media, and why you have the U.S. military going to the lengths they do to embed troops, right? Like they did with the Iraq War. And I don't know, Danny, what do you have any just kind of thoughts on that, or just before you go, also just maybe give us some Celtics nuggets, since we're not, we can be fanboy, it's occasional fanboys too.
I love Jaylen Brown.
I like how I just transitioned from imperial death to Celtics nuggets, but
well, real quick, I mean, my dad was in the, he was drafted. He spent a couple of years after Tet came back. He never talked to us about what happened there. He had this in the line of we didn't really do much fighting. The war was kind of we didn't really do much of it. But he almost got killed by his own own squadron. It's crazy stuff that you just hear. He just kind of blurts out, but he never talked about the war. He hated it. was very opposed to Iraq. I had that kind of background. And then, Mike, you were saying Libya was huge. It was huge for me too, because Obama had said, oh, we're going to get out of Iraq, we're going to get out of Afghanistan. Didn't happen. And then this invasion of Libya, which was an African country, and this war was being led by a black president. It just, that was it. It was just like, oh, and then the narratives of the rape, the Gaddafi sending out mercenaries with Viagra. That was it for me. I was like, I was skeptical. I was like, oh, all these anarchists and telling me about this kind of anti-war stuff.
Yes.
And then these socialists are saying Cuba and Soviet Union. I'm like, I don't know, but they weren't being concrete. And when it was Libya, that was like, oh, I need to search. What the heck? Like, why Libya? Why now? Why Obama? All that stuff. So, but getting back to, just a broader point of, when Iraq was happening, when those bombs were coming down in the corporate media, it was just, it was almost like fireworks almost every night, nightly news. My dad was a huge, he just binged the nightly news every night. And it was just, the buildings on fire, but they don't talk about how many people dead. Only the U.S. Yeah, only the U.S. Only when there would be U.S. soldiers who would die was it counted. But Celtics Nuggets really quick. I'm very disappointed in the Celtics because I'm one of those obnoxious Boston fans who are like championship or bust. So last year I thought they had a chance to make the NBA Finals at the very least.
Right.
And it all came apart. Now there's a lot of unfortunate roster issues on the Celtics.
Big time.
I hope Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum remain together, but the rest of the team, there's a lot of problems that need to be solved.
What about Theus? What's his deal? He's kind of like
Tyus?
Tyus.
I mean, I don't think Tyus is going to be on the team very much longer. I think he'll be a trade chip because he's a decent player, but he's not big enough. He's not. Yeah. He's not really, and Tristan Thompson was supposed to be the guy. That was LeBron's kind of right-hand man, very solid. He's not playing the way he should be. There's just a lot of
Marcus Smart, always a people's champ for getting up in that racist white dude's face in Texas Tech when he was in college. But how's he? Is he fit? Danny Ainge, by the way, his nephew was Tennessee Volunteer quarterback Eric Ainge. Danny Ainge was like a superstar 3-sport athlete coming out of high school in Oregon, but he's not too high. He was a phenomenal baseball player too. But not too high on Danny's favorite people list right now.
Well, Ainge, he's rode the wave of the big three, and it's a 2008, 9, 10 era, won championship, should have had 2. I think a lot of people think should have had 2.
Kobe thinks he should have had 0.
Yeah, I know. Well, Kendrick Perkins, there's the whole Kendrick. If you're a Boston fan, Kendrick Perkins got hurt during the series, and that was kind of like the game changer of 2009-10 season.
He could push Gasol. He could push Gasol around.
And Gasol and Bynum just destroyed the Celtics in that next NBA Finals. But he rode the wave up that, got all these draft picks, shipping Garnett and Pierce out, had all of this opportunity to, I think, build a really interesting team. And while they got Tatum and Brown out of it, he hasn't shown that he can put together a team around pieces so they can compete at a level where it's not just, oh, you're nice, you're an underdog team, but keeping at a level where you're considered a team that can win a championship. I will also say for watching Celtics basketball, watching some of these, I kind of dig into these sports shows like Undisputed and First Things First and whatnot. I will say the LA West Coast bias on sports is basketball in particular ridiculous. I mean, LeBron just killed. Like LeBron just sealed the deal by going to LA in the first place. But literally no other team is covered. In the Celtics, oh my, it's like to pander to that fan base. Either they're not talking about them or they're like
Danny, don't you feel there's a huge difference? Because FS1 is Cali. It is like the West Coast. Like they're centered. I feel like it's like ESPN's like kind of like, well, now with LeBron being in LA, that's the thing. But like it's like Eastern, like because you always hear about East Coast bias, that like. But now I think you're right.
In college football,
the Pac-12 is like an afterthought. But like you have the whole FS1 model. You know, the whole, Pac-12 after dark, Pac-10 after dark, and they would always say, but like, Skip Bayless and Shannon Sharp, absolutely. The whole FS1 scene. Colin Cowherd just really annoys me. I mean, he's just like that libertarian, like everything's so rational. He's just like, well, we looked at this like, it's like we're buying stocks.
He's an entrepreneur, man. He's an entrepreneur. Everything's about being an entrepreneur for him.
Oh, I can't stand that guy, man.
Nate, let's let Mike sign off really quick. Let him.
Mike, so what's on your radar for just frivolous, sports fandom, real quick on the way out, just to end things on a lighter note?
On my radar is the draft is coming up. I think there's no NFL combine to satiate. If there was an NFL combine, we could actually talk about how slave market-ish it is, but there's no NFL combine due to COVID-19 restrictions. So just following free agency, and all that jazz. Of course, J.J. Watt just signed with the Cardinals, which is supposed to be a big deal, even though he sucks.
He's washed up.
Yeah, it's over, bro. I think
I was gonna say, as a human,
there you go, Mike.
He's
Mike,
great.
Mike, order your jersey.
In Jacksonville, we're counting down the days where we draft college football activists. And leader Trevor Lawrence, who led a Black Lives Matter demonstration in Clemson, South Carolina.
While he was talking to Donald Trump the day before.
Yeah, I mean, he you have to talk to people sometimes, but
right.
BLM activist. But
all right,
looking forward to that.
I put $500 on Vegas for Jacksonville to take a punter with the first overall pick.
We drove.
If that happens,
did that in the third round.
You could
first round with the first pick, and if it happens, I will be a billionaire because of those long odds, and then I'm going to buy the New York Yankees, and then I'm going to burn them down.
Whoa.
Anyway.
Oh man! All right. Anyways, on that note, we might have to go, but first of all, there's just you're maybe
I would never bet on that, by the way.
What'd you say, $500? You would.
I was never bet. I would never.
I don't think you would even be that, because you would be like that guy that placed a prop bet for the Super Bowl about will there be a streaker, and then he was the streaker. So then the offshore sportsbook was like, well, no, the prop bet doesn't mean if you are gonna make the bet because you're planning to go streak on the field at the Super Bowl. That doesn't count. So then it's we're not paying you. And he was writing all these checks he couldn't cash after that. Yeah. He thought he had the money in the bank. Anyways, we got to wrap. But it was just it was good talking about all this. I do want to end. The Lewis Nix III thing really has hit me hard. We didn't talk about it as much, but let me just list off a few of the guys that have passed without a lot of fanfare. One people might not know as much about was the guy who was at South Carolina when I was there. And it really struck me as one of the first ones at these. And this guy, Kenny McKinley, was a wide receiver from the Atlanta area. And his suicide happened. He played for Steve Spurrier's South Carolina team along with Sidney Rice. And McKinley was his whole life was football. He was an excellent possession receiver, caught a lot of balls, his whole life was defined around football, and you see him here. He was a really, really just humble, good dude. But when he got cut from the Broncos, he felt his life was over, and he killed himself, and it's that he's an example. I think people will say being sensational, highlighting the extremes, but and it's not to just demonize football. There's a lot of pathologies in our society, and Mike and I have talked about a lot. We have a love-hate relationship with the game, but it's McKinley's a guy that is a perfect encapsulation of this whole, what capitalism does in terms of making you identify and construct your identity around football. And he was an excellent player. It's he did everything the right way. He he ran tremendous routes. I just think he couldn't process why Josh McDaniels, as you see here, would not want him on his team. And to him, that meant his value as a human being wasn't there anymore. And it just really was just, tragic. I mean, we've got to play with him on our shoulders and in our hearts. And this was like about 10 years ago. And then you like real quick, you skip forward, you got the case of Trey Mason essentially, losing his mind. I mean, and like, we don't really know what's happened, but you see here, there's videos here, what happened to Trey Mason. This was 2018. He was a bruising running back, like at Auburn, when I wrote in the essay I wrote like about when Lewis Nix passed, just about, look, it's not all. I've talked to like some football people I conference with, especially a high school football coach up here, Robert Hampton at Lincoln High School, who's like, on the front lines, man. He really does a lot for the kids that have hardly anything in their lives. And but I will say that it's not, CTE is part of it, but it is an oversimplification to say it's just that. It's also just like the fact that when you have something that's like so intense and it's just all consuming, and it's on us, I think, and it shows the power of having either a good coaching or coaching that makes it seem like life and death, and also like a metaphor of like battle royale. Like this is sort of like I'll just go ahead and put it out there. Rick Trickett at Florida State, the O-line coach, coached my brother, and was there when I transferred there in 2008. I mean, he coached like that. The idea that, just if it was stuff he got away, I mean, he would grab you by the face mask, rip your head around and stuff like that, get up, constantly, just threatening that you're going to be out in the street again. I'm going to say, and especially for kids that are middle class, it's one thing, like, okay, whatever. I'm not like worried, but for a kid who grew up in the muck, like Belglade, Pahokee type area, has nothing to fall back on. Think of the kind of power dynamics that has over a player like that. So there's just so many things we could get into, man. But like, really, the Trey Mason thing, I really want to learn more, and I need to dig a little deeper about what he is doing now. But he had cases where his mom, like Trey Mason's mother, believes that football, is basically, caused his brain, caused him to kind of go crazy. He said he's a 10-year-old now, basically. Trey Mason's mother says, this is 2019, he's 22 and a 10-year-old mindset, blames football and police video. And LA Rams running back Mason's blames his off-field incidents on head injuries suffered in football. I mean, he was a bruising back. I mean, you just go back to his old, when he ran the ball, ran over Jalen Ramsey, a freshman defensive back, to score what was the apparent game-winning, touchdown. In that game where my brother ended up winning the national championship his senior year, last ever game he played at Florida State. And that's it right there. That's Mason. That's a freshman right out of high school, Jalen Ramsey. That's at the Rose Bowl. So then I was sitting just, right about in that end zone he's about to go score in. And it just hit you hard. And then you look at like Lewis Nix, Joe McKnight, and getting involved with stuff. That wasn't like, that was tragedy, but it's not just CT. My point is that guys get like, they're lost and they get involved in risky and dangerous behaviors post football because you've lived on the edge. Like, playing the game is living on the edge, right? And you crave that kind of like, living a normal life. The boredom, the monotony of that is just something a lot of guys can't adjust to. Some do, right? Plenty do. But we're talking about percentages, man. And there is a disproportionate number of guys in boxing, right? Let's be real. Hockey, and some former hockey players, so it's real, and we got to keep having these conversations, and we'll hopefully, as a recurring theme, come back and maybe start highlighting more of these examples, and just realize that it's not just as simple as CTE. We're not just going to be like, say, oh, everything just CTE. All right, it can't just be that. But it's one of the factors, and there's a lot of others too, and we need to keep highlighting that. We're also be on the lookout. Danny, I haven't told you this, but we're going to start doing a profile of all 32 NFL owners. And I'm thinking like maybe next week's live stream will be the first one we'll roll out. We'll do it in like 8 installments. We'll do like 4 each week, for our weekly live stream. One of us will take 2. We'll rotate, and other weeks we'll have 1. And just kind of let people realize these are, like, football is like, we think of like the way church used to be. What other place brings together, 60, 70, 80,000 people in one spot at one time, not to mention all the people watching on TV, right? And And it's like the ruling class, like they see the value in that, right? And that's why the prestige and it's not even the money they make off football. They've already become like billionaires at that point. At that point, it's about the prestige and the ideological, like influential ability to influence, right? Influence ideology, influence society, influence pop culture, man. So, I don't know, maybe I don't know. What's the deal with the Celtics ownership? Maybe Dan, you know any background with their deal?
I don't. With
Try to ignore that.
Yeah, I try to ignore that with the Celtics.
Yeah, you gotta have.
They have these duds. I mean, they have these duds. The Gross Spec crew, Wick Gross Spec.
Yeah,
they're just. I mean, they're just white dudes. They're kind of like new money white guys.
Well,
they're.
But Jacksonville's interesting because it's like the first Pakistan. You love it, diversity. First Pakistani. Well, now we have a billionaire. Pakistani
minority owner. Yeah,
we have a minority owner. Stephen A. Smith would be like, "This is great. We're like making progress." Yeah.
I think
it's all about getting more billionaire, like people of color owners, right? That's progress.
Yeah. I mean,
I guess for them, right?
I'm not going to be like, I think it's silly to be like, yeah, fuck any, like fuck him, he's an anti-union, whatever. But
no doubt, yeah.
Fuck him.
All right, so I think we're getting to the point here. Neil Sanger, we appreciate you hanging out, man, all the time. Neil, one of you guys should write a book about the Francis Scott Key, or just about the whole football kind of riff I was just on. Maybe all of the above, man. I'll just write just a volume this big of just if I could ever get organized.
While we're waiting on Neil to reply on that, I want to piggyback off just something Mike said really quick, and that's just to mention to Danny. Huge fan. Absolutely love your work. Like, there is a short list of important people I feel in these spaces and in these movements, and you're on it. And absolutely. This was a pleasure.
Yeah,
for sure. We'll do it again sometime.
No doubt. All right. You said the experience post sports. Yeah. No, I feel you. We got the experience post sports. We got to write a book about it. So, Mike, let's get to work. All right. It'll be. Mike's like, I don't know about that, man. Anyways, he's we get movements out in the streets, man. Right. But we'll see. Next week, by the way, I will be interviewing Professor Derek White, who wrote Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Mike, at 4 p.m. I don't know if you want to join me, do a co-interview, 4 p.m. on Wednesday. But it's about Jake Gaither, Florida A&M, and the history of Black college football. And what he really is highlighting in the thesis in this book, I'm really excited. What I'm excited about is it's not just narrowly about Florida A&M and Jake Gaither. He's using that as an illustrative example of how some of the how integration really harmed a lot of previously existing Black communities, in the sense that if you don't dismantle that.
I'll check it out. And do that.
If you don't dismantle if capitalism is still the system, and then all the players the elite players start going to all the PWIs, and they're just cherry picking those, and it led to really a whole culture and way of life that had developed, really being the kind of and it was like a systematic decision on the behalf of the white universities to not schedule HBCUs, not play them, to make sure that they put them in sort of a second tier, as they were championing and really with the triumphant, they're sort of we've integrated the sport type stuff. So it's the other side of integration, right? That's maybe not talked about enough, So he's not arguing we need to go back to being segregated.
I hear you.
But just, right. So anyways, let's wrap on that. All right. Looking forward to talking to Professor Derek White next week, learning about, history of HBCU football and just, just in general, how it ties into this lovely exceptional American innocent, not so innocent society. And with that, we are out. Peace. And until next time, solidarity.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it, Danny. Yeah. All right. End of broadcast.